Hello, my name is Kargl-Simard. I'm the President and CEO of Adventus Mining Corporation. Adventus has been around in the public market since 2017. In late 2017, we entered into Ecuador. We chose to pivot the company into Ecuador to build a significant copper gold business. During that period of time, we've been advancing the next copper gold mine globally called Curipamba. But just recently, in the last week, we've announced a very significant combination with Ross Beaty's Luminex Resources, creating a very significant platform for growth in Ecuador. So what is the new company, this Luminex, which transaction will close at the end of January? This company is focused on advancing the El Domo copper gold zinc volcanic massive sulfide project through construction as the next step and into production early 2026. This is an extremely economic project, really driven by grades. So you're looking at around 5% copper equivalent pre-recovery, over 10 million tons, and most of that is open pitable. Results in a 14-year mine life, producing around 25,000 tons per annum copper equivalent at a very low all-in sustaining cost of $1.26 per pound. We do have $241 million of project financing in place, primarily with Wheaton Precious Metals and Trafigura. That Wheaton Precious Metals stream drives an improved after-tax rate of return. At long-term prices, you're looking at around a 60% after-tax IRR based on our feasibility study filed in December 2021. Over the last 2 years, we have been receiving the final permits for the project. We expect all the permits in for construction in first quarter of 2024. We're currently approximately 65% complete on detailed engineering. So this mine is going to drive significant free cash flow from 2026 onwards, and we believe at that time we will be sitting at significantly higher than the current all-time high copper price of around $5 a pound. The combination of these companies brings already independently strong shareholder bases together to what I think is the strongest shareholder base of any junior in our peer group. The largest investors being Ross Beaty, Wheaton Precious Metals, Altius, and a large contingent of high net worth Ecuadorians. Both groups had significant Ecuadorian teams. This is a true G&A synergy of what we expect over $2 million a year. What Luminex brings to the equation is it brings approximately 10 additional copper gold copper projects to add to Adventus's 3 in Ecuador, one of which has approximately 8 million ounces of gold equivalent. So now we have significant leverage to the precious metals price as a result of the Condor resource base. There is a PEA on such project on a larger scale scenario that is highly leveraged to the gold price. If we get to a few more $100 per ounce higher, this is $1 billion NPV 5 after tax. Combined with Adventus's projects, we have dozens and dozens of copper gold exploration targets over our portfolio, and our portfolio mirrors or is near the size of SolGold's concession holdings in Ecuador. We currently have a few partners on the combined portfolio. We expect to announce additional partnerships on such exploration portfolio And we expect over time, let's say over the next year, for that portfolio to be self-funding with multiple drill rigs turning multiple projects while El Domo is being built. The combination is effectively at market based on their respective 20-day VWAPs. It results in Adventus owning 61% of the pro forma company, Luminex 39%. We're completing a concurrent $17 million equity raise, which is oversubscribed. That number I'm hoping to see is 18 or 19 million when it is complete. As part of that, there's a $13.5 million non-brokered placement, which is being subscribed for a third Ross Beatty, a third Wheaton Precious Metals, and the third high net worth Ecuadorians. Board of directors will be 5 Adventus, 3 Luminex. Management will be Adventus. Transaction to close end of January. Our projects are accumulated primarily in Bolivar province around our El Domo project, and in Zamora province, which is the big mining province of Ecuador, where you have Fruta del Norte and Mirador, both very large operating mines, successful operating mines, and also Solaris. We will dig deeper into Zamora province later in the presentation. But overall, you're looking at over 135,000 hectares of very prospective copper gold exploration land in Ecuador. This is a snapshot of where we think the pro forma company will be at the end of January. So part of this deal is seeking relevancy in a very difficult junior market. You're looking at about 140 to 150 million Canadian market cap, sufficient cash to get through permits and the start of construction, the first few months of construction, and the shareholder base, as mentioned, is phenomenal. Ross Beatty at 13%, Ecuadorian investors at 13%, Wheaton at 10%, Altius at 5%, over 30 institutional investors, and a very large portion of this retail shareholding as high net worth, recognizable mining investors. Management is in the green. This is the current Adventus management team. This is a fairly young entrepreneurial group that have built or financed mines in the past and is geared up to constructing El Domo. ESG-wise, we're in a very good position with their communities. This summer, we went through the socialization phase of the environmental consultation part of our project. We had very good engagement with their communities. The main focus of the communities is when does this project start construction, and when can we have all these jobs you're talking about. El Domo will be connected to the electrical grid in Ecuador, which is primarily hydroelectric power. We invest $1 to $1.5 million a year into communities and social programs, one of them being the Minero Soccer Club, which has a professional team, but also multiple feeder schools with the local communities, getting youth involved in soccer at a young age in a structured program with coaches, etc. We are the largest committed but undeveloped foreign direct investment project in Ecuador in all industries. So we are very important to the country. We have the third ever investment protection agreement in Ecuador alongside Mirador and Fruta del Norte for mining. And we expect to have up to 800 construction jobs. Over 80% of that will be Ecuadorian, over 90% once in production, and 450 long-term well-paid jobs. Now, looking at El Domo here, the first 10 years is a open pit, 6.5 million tons of reserves, 5% copper equivalent, broken down approximately 2% copper, 2.5% zinc, 2.5 grams gold. You produce copper and zinc concentrates. This open pit deposit is primarily 40 to 80 meters below surface. Then you have another 4 to 5 years of underground, approximately 3 million tons of 5% copper equivalent in years 10 to 14. We are about a 3-hour drive, primarily on the Pan American Highway from Guayaquil, the largest city in Ecuador. This is how El Domo looks. The open pit is on the side of the mountain where my cursor is. There's 3 roads to the project you can see here, one coming from here, one here, one here. The process plant, tailings, waste rock is where my cursor is here in the foreground of the page. The underground mine is underneath this dome. The top part of it is barren. So the underground mine will be added likely from the side of the mountain here fairly shallow as well, and can be mined at the same time as the open pit. This is primarily a copper mine with the precious metal stream included. You're closer to 60% copper, but you have very good byproduct credits. And in year one, you're starting at 7% copper equivalent open pit. So margins will be exceptional. Timeline-wise, we are looking at start of construction in April of 2024 after the rainy season is complete. 22 months of construction, first concentrate production about January of 2026. We have designed this project in the simplest way possible. Let's get into production as quickly as possible, and let's optimize the project through various initiatives such as expansion through cash flow and improving on precious metals recoveries once in production. We see a clear path to over 100 million in NPV8 improvements to the project through some of these engineering projects once in production. Now looking at the Luminex portfolio in Zamora province. So you've got Solaris up here with Roinsa, Mirador, Chinese copper gold mine that's operating, Frutal Norte, which is Lundin Gold, and other major companies such as Sol Gold and Fortescue and Newcrest. In the yellow and the darker blue are the Luminex properties. You can see these properties are in very good vicinity of major deposits. Currently, Orchides is joint ventured with the Japanese. Some of these yellow concessions you will see joint ventures in 2024. The key project coming in from Luminex is Condor, where you have 8 million ounces of gold equivalent, and just south of Frutal Norte. The border with Peru is here, but this is an extremely well mineralized district. There is a PEA on a larger scale, primarily open pit project at Condor that was done in 2021. You can see here just the leverage between $1,600 gold and $1,760 gold. The NPV after tax goes from 387 to $562 million. So where you are at currently over $2,000 an ounce gold, that NPV would be more like 800 million US, and we're paying approximately 30 million Canadian in shares for the entire portfolio. Now, this was done prior to the highest grade discoveries on the project. And I'll do a quick snapshot on the next page. Cuyes West. Cuyes West is a structure that was discovered just over a year ago, and the highest grade intercepts in the history of the Condor project have come out of a small surgical drill program. 5 meters of 30 grams, 3 meters of 40 grams. These tend to happen near the intersection of this Ruiz structure in Cuyes West. We think this Cuyes West structure continues down to the south here and will intersect the camp structure. We would expect to see high grades around here as well. But these high grades are open in most directions. It requires additional drilling. And within that 8 million ounces, there is a higher grade core plus what was discovered at Cuyes West. And there's a goal here over this decade here to delineate 1 to 2 million ounces at, say, 5 grams gold equivalent. So that's much, much higher grade than the PEA. These veins are very easily accessible from the mountain, and some of them can be bulk mineable. And at 5 grams, that would drive, call it the 30% after-tax IRR project of long-term precious metals prices. So you have a higher grade project, similar capex to El Domo that you could follow El Domo, or you have a big open pit, large capex project with significant leverage to the precious metals price. So to summarize, we think this creates an extremely strong portfolio and base to grow from in Ecuador. 13 projects, copper, gold, gold, copper, in strong provinces to operate. The next mine to be built in Ecuador and El Domo, let alone the next greenfield copper mine to be built globally, in our view. We now have a clear second mine in a smaller scale Condor project that we will continue to proceed with. And now with this portfolio, we'll be able to drill exploration targets funded by others while we complete construction, which is a completely new dynamic to Adventus. This transaction allows us to bring in at least 17, probably more, million US in equity financing on long-term shareholders on a private placement basis. You will not see short-term flipping of this financing, which is important for us. Permitting-wise, we expect very significant news flow over the next few months. We're near the end of that. Construction start Q2, which should be a huge milestone for us. 22 months of construction. Project is not remote. It's near the largest city in Ecuador, near a major port, has access to power. Most of the employees that construct in the mine will come from local communities. And we have a very strategic and high optionality exploration portfolio that we will continue to optimize over the next few years.
Thank you for a great presentation, Christian. We'll now begin with the Q&A session. And first we'll speak about the people behind Adventus and interview the general manager of the Curipamba project. Note that the Domo mining project is referred to as Curipamba in this discussion, because Curipamba is the district that Adventus owns. We'll then inquire Christian about the merger with Luminex, which is about to close in a couple of weeks. Thereafter we'll go on to the Curipamba project and discuss its permitting status, construction timeline, previous work done on it, as well as expansion opportunities. Thereafter we'll touch on how Ecuador is as a mining jurisdiction, before discussing Adventus' strategic plans and how they plan on deploying its proceeds. Thank you for an excellent presentation, Christian. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Sure. I'm a graduate from UBC in Vancouver with a metallurgical engineering degree with a focus on hydrometallurgy. I worked for a company called Dynatech Corporation in their hydrometallurgical group from 2004 to 2007. Left in 2007 for Toronto to become a mining investment banker. Worked for Haywood Securities for 3 years and Raymond James for 7 years. And one of my best clients was Altius Minerals Corporation. They convinced me to leave investment banking to start Adventus. They were the promoter behind me. They wrote the first check. They're still the largest shareholder of the company. And the rest is history.
What would you consider to be your greatest achievement so far?
That's a good question. I would say number one out of all of this is the team that I've been able to put together at Adventus. I love this group. We get along really well, and I hope to be with this team, not only building El Domo, but multiple projects and or companies over the next 20 years. Yeah, I think that's the most rewarding part of my life to date. In the development of this company, I'm very proud of, but honestly, it's just taking one step at a time, being dealt with adversity or decisions, and we make the right decisions as a group and move on. So it's that kind of logical thinking process. It's not more than that.
How large is your equity stake in Adventus Mining? You can say however you want, but prefer the post-merger.
Yeah, so I own and I paid up at just over $1, 2.3 or 2.4 million shares. And I have options and RSUs for another million or so. So call it 3.5 to 4 million in that range, which is the biggest chunk of my net worth. It used to be worth a lot more. Everything I own used to be worth a lot more, but I believe in the copper price, and I believe getting El Domo into production as quickly as possible will be the way that I will make my money back and more.
So in other words, if your options were exercised, you would have around 4 million shares in the new entity.
But it would be just shy of 1% of the pro forma company.
Could you give us an overview? How have you built Adventus management and board?
So I was employee number one, doing everything over the first few months, and then brought over a gentleman by the name of Sam Leung from Lundin Mining. That first year, him and I worked out of my home, looking for the right asset to build a company. We looked at 240 assets in 25 countries. We put several $1 billion of offers on the table. Altius was doing our back office at the time. When we selected to go into Ecuador, we hired our CFO, who I'd known through investment banking days. Our head of exploration was the only person we hired over the years from a headhunter. And then everyone else, head of construction, VP projects, head of environment, country manager, etc., was through word of mouth and or relationships we had. And we've hired those people as required over the last few years.
If we move from board and management down to the level below that, which is sort of your in-country management. So, I mean, working abroad, it's key to have, especially in Latin America, a great in-country manager. And so who is your in-country manager in Ecuador?
Yeah, we got two key people in Ecuador. Alvaro Duenas, who's our country manager. He ran Codelco's Ecuadorian business for years, including the Urimagua discovery, very well connected with government. And Skott Mealer, who's the GM of our Curipamba Project and VP construction. He built the last major mine in South America, La Coipa for Kinross, on time, under budget. That mine completed construction last year. He's married to an Ecuadorian. He's a star. He brings everyone together. But our focus from the beginning, entering into Ecuador, was to maximize Ecuadorian money and Ecuadorian people. So our entire team in Ecuador is Ecuadorian or lives in Ecuador.
Moving back to your founders, or Altius Minerals. So Altius Minerals, and particularly Altius Minerals CEO, Brian Dalton, have been very integral for Adventus. How active are they currently in Adventus?
Well, Brian is a personal friend. But as I mentioned, they're the promoter to the story. They're the largest shareholder. They also have a royalty on our Curipamba project, 2% royalty. Brian used to be the chairman of this company. He had to drop off as he became the CEO of Altius Renewable Royalties, and he was the CEO of Altius. He can't be the CEO of three companies. But he was very interested in what we're doing. We catch up every few months, and he and they help wherever they can. This summer, we were faced with a little bit of liquidity crunch in the middle of the summer, and they came up to help us with a $4 million unsecured convertible debenture. The terms are expensive, but they came through in a short period of time, and that was extremely helpful for us. So it's arm's length, but they're still very involved.
Hello, Scott. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Sure. Good morning, Jasper. My name is Skott Mealer. I'm originally from the northeast of the United States, from Idaho. After high school, I was in the Air Force before going to engineering school at the Colorado School of Mines. I studied electrical engineering and started out my career in an EPCM firm called Washington Group International. I started out in the oil and gas sector for a few years and then switched over to mining. So for about the last 17 years, I've been working in mining, mainly on project development, construction, and commissioning and stuff.
Thank you. And how did you get involved with Adventus Mining?
Yeah, so Dustin Small, who is the vice president of project development and the project director, we worked together in Chile on the last project I did before joining Adventus Mining, which was on the La Coipa restart for Kinross, who I worked for a number of years. He was working for Hatch, and we got to know each other there. And then he joined Adventus, and probably about a year later, I joined Adventus. So I've been with the company since April of last year.
Have you been involved in the construction of mine before?
Yeah, so I was actually in Ecuador before. Starting in 2006, I came to Ecuador to work on the Mirador project when it was owned by the Canadian company Condor Resources. And I also worked for, after working for Mirador, went to work for Kinross on their Fruta del Norte project here in Ecuador. So I was here in Ecuador from about 2006 to 2013, working on project development and early works basically for both of those projects. I then ended up staying with Kinross for about 10 years and worked in a number of locations with them on mining projects, on studies, and also on construction and commissioning. So I worked at the Maricunga mine in Chile, then a major expansion at the Paracatu mine in Brazil. Then I was project director for a major expansion and plant rebuild at the Round Mountain mine in Nevada. Then I went back to Chile for the restart of the Throughput project, which, as I said, is dusted and made the connection with Adventus Mining before coming back to Ecuador last year in April.
What experience from Kinross will benefit you in the construction of Curipamba?
Yeah, so with Kinross, I had a number of assignments with increasing responsibility, culminating in project director on several projects. So overall responsibility for several projects, and so. And it helps also the prior experience in same types of environmental conditions, same types of soil conditions, same types of terrain, weather, contracting conditions, and then also generally as project management and as a project director, the main focuses are on safety, cost adherence, schedule adherence, quality, contract management, change control, all of those necessary items to be able to finish a project on time and on budget.
Do you consider yourself to be more skilled in construction or operation of mines?
My experience has been more heavily on the project development and construction.
But from our understanding, so when Curipamba comes in production, you will still be general manager and oversee the operation.
That's the current plan.
We've now arrived at the perhaps most important topic of the discussion, the merger with Luminex Resources. We'll discuss why Adventus chose to do it, why they think Luminex Resources are a good fit. Then we'll discuss the terms of the transaction, such as shares outstanding, warrants, management changes, as well as how they will save on G&A. We'll also discuss Luminex projects and how Adventus plans on funding the construction of Curipamba. Let's move to the most important subject of today, which is the merger with Luminex Resources. But before we discuss it, so if we wind the clock back to the beginning of this year, you had 330 million, give or take, in financing commitment from Wheaton Precious Metals and Trafigura. You're well advanced with the ESIA permit, and you had an investment protection agreement with the Ecuadorian government, a third of its sort, to get it. So what happened, and why couldn't you move forward on your own?
Well, there's two aspects there. There's permitting / government, and there's finance. When we started 2022, we felt that there was a reasonable chance of having our project permitted between 12 to 18 months. That quickly became unattainable when last summer, the Ecuadorian government shut down for 7 months due to indigenous protests. So that was our first 7-month delay. Then in 2024, there was the second attempt at impeaching President Lasso, which took us back another 3 months. And then between August and call it now, which has now been resolved, we've had a constitutional court challenge that halted all projects in the consultation phase in Ecuador and all industries. So that delayed us by another 4 months. So in total, we have been delayed, call it 12 to 15 months to get our final permits from when we initially expected. And it has not been it's a 12-month delay and you're going to get your permits. It's truly been a roller coaster ride, which is the worst when you're running a non-cash flowing public company in a liquidity crisis in a junior space. So it's been very challenging and trying for our team, but we've stuck together and just become stronger through that. We're very committed to making sure that this happens. So that explains part of it. The other part is finance. Every month delay for construction with the team in place is an extra chunk of cash. And so this 12 to 15 month delay has added, call it $10 to $15 million of additional capital spending prior to construction that we had not anticipated. Not all of that is just G&A out the door. Like there's good work that's been done, such as detail engineering, all the permitting work, procurement, etc. But it is a draw. Entering this year, and as people who know me would say I'm a pretty aggressive type of person. When I think about running a public company, I'm quite conservative. So entering this year, I was very concerned about the capital markets and the ability to access capital from the capital markets with a reasonable cost of capital. And so we initiated an informal internal process to try to find capital that does not rely on the public markets. And I think all juniors should think that way. Assume there's no money available and find money from somewhere else, and then see at that point, if you do have offers, if there is money from the public markets, and make a decision. So since February, we've been doing that. We have, on the positive side, we've been pleasantly surprised at how much interest there is on the project from all types of investors. We think when the final permits come through, we will have a long list of corporates interested in doing something with us. But it's just been too confusing from the political and permitting perspective for us to be taken out or to be merged with a significant producer. This year we looked at selling minority stakes in the project, convertible debentures, mergers with other companies, sale of the company, public offerings, and everything in between. On the downside, it's taken a lot longer to come to a transaction that makes sense for us. We were hoping to announce something in July, and now we find ourselves in December. But sometimes it's worth waiting, and we really are excited about this transaction with Luminex. It really checks all the boxes for us in terms of Adventus kind of running with it and building a company. And I didn't talk about how the transaction all came together, but the culture is really good between both groups. This transaction took about 2 months or so to get announced. It was very, very quick from an M&A perspective. So that's important going forward, that you like the people that you're involved with.
The initial capex for Curipamba was estimated at 248 million in the feasibility study from 2021. How much of an increase in the initial capex could we expect?
Yeah, Ballpark would be around 15% higher. We don't think that's a material number. It's something that is readily manageable by our group. There is extra debt capacity on the project as well that we could consider. So we are through 65% detailed engineering, and we're around that 15% number. Some areas of the project we're seeing some improvements in capex. There are some optimization areas we're working on from a process plant equipment cost. So we only plan to announce publicly the final control budget when we start construction. So another, call it 5 months or so from now. Our peers that have recut numbers over the last few years are up around 30%, around 15%, but we have a very small footprint project. Our scope hasn't changed very much from the feasibility study. And we found some innovative ways to push initial capex into sustaining capex. So I think we're quite comfortable there on kind of the 15%.
That total initial capex, is that including pre-construction activities such as early earthworks, road constructions?
Yeah, it includes all of that. We pushed $10 million, what used to be in our pre-construction budget, into the initial capex. The other thing is inflation in Ecuador has been quite low. I think it's running around 2%. Part of that is US dollar. Part of that is this new consultation process affecting all projects in all industries has resulted in nothing getting built over the last few years. So there's 176 projects in the queue. We're the largest. It's about $2.5 billion of investment. For example, the Quito subway expansion is stopped. There's 8 or 9 hospitals that are in the queue, 8 or 9 water treatment plants. So once these projects start getting built, that inflation number will increase, but we're the first one up. in terms of those projects getting permitted. Luminex and Adventus both found ourselves needing to raise capital by the end of this year. Both of us have a significant business in country. Both of us have a strong shareholder base. Both of us are copper gold, gold copper. Both of us love El Domo. So those are the building blocks of a transaction. They solicited us in kind of middle of September, and we moved on from there. After speaking with Ross Beatty, I met with other major shareholders, and we culminated the transaction. So now pro forma, we have, rather than a 30 and 60 million respective Canadian market cap company, we're at 90 pre the financing. With the financing, you're close to 140 million. It's a lot more relevant in this market. We've been able to raise capital, I think, with only long-term investors. That solves both of our capital needs this year and gets us to the start of first few months of construction. Adventus on its own is binary around El Domo. While we have exposure to multiple metals, we don't have huge leverage to any metal. Now with the Luminex transaction, as I mentioned, we're going to have exploration of multiple projects while we build. So that's further chance for a major new discovery to go along with El Domo. And we have those 8 million ounces of gold equivalent. And that is huge leverage, as I mentioned. If we end up being $2,500, $3,000 gold, that PEA is going to be well north of $1 billion NPV5. That's, I think, an interesting dynamic for our shareholders. So, Luminex shareholders get the next mine to be built, get real free cash flow 2026 going on. We get an exciting exploration portfolio that I think will drive new discoveries and significant commodity leverage. And combine the shareholder base and platform is way better.
Will Luminex in-country team remain?
Yeah, they've got a lot of good people. And they got 10 projects, so it's important that the intellectual property continues. One of the joint ventures they have today is operated by Luminex. We see our ability to operate in Ecuador as a real strength, and what majors that or mid-tiers that might be interested in some of our projects would be looking for, rather than setting up shop from scratch in Ecuador. They're going to leverage our exploration teams in country. Luminex has the relationship with Lumina. Lumina's building Cangrejos. Some of those employees may move to Lumina. A lot of them are going to stay with pro forma company going forward.
Okay, makes sense. And if we go up one level, so management team and board, how will it look like post-merger?
Yeah, the officers of the company are all Adventus. There will be some transitionary arrangements with some of the Luminex people. I mean, they're not going anywhere. They own 40% of the pro forma company going forward. But we've got the capacity to take on most of the activities on our own. Board-wise is 5 Adventus. Our chairman, Mark Wellings, will continue. And then there's 3 Luminex. So Marshall Koval, who's currently the CEO of Luminex, will be on the board. David Farrell is on the board. He's Fortuna, Endeavor financial guy. And Ron Hallis will be joining the board. He's the COO of Lumina. He's a projects guy. And then we've got an advisory board with 2 advisors that are operational COO type. But from Luminex, we bring on Leo Hathaway. Leo is a very accomplished explorationist, and he will kind of help us through ranking all of our targets. If we end up drilling some of our 100% owned projects, driving what that exploration program looks like.
You're saying that you'll save about 2 million in G&A annually. So what are you saving on?
The cost to run a public company in Canada, like a real public company, just your audit, legal, basic marketing, office, all that, you're talking about probably getting close to $1 million Canadian. And then the Luminex has 6 or 7 officers that are all professionals with 10, 20, 30, 40 years experience. So it's a combination of just the basic cost to run a public company that is duplicated now and not required, plus the savings from officer perspective.
How many shares will there be post-merger, both outstanding and fully diluted?
It's still an estimate, which is in our corporate presentation. What is not locked in is the final size of the bought deal equity financing that we're doing. We're through 6 million Canadian. We went out to get 5. We're through 6. We can go up to 10. So we'll know that by December the 8th. But if you're assuming we just do the base deal plus the over-allotment, getting it to 5.75 million, we're about 370 million shares outstanding on a basic basis. And I believe it's around 415 or 420 million shares on a fully diluted in and out of the money basis. Most of those are out of the money. Those are warrants in Luminex that had a price of just over 50 cents, I believe. Luminex is currently trading around 23, 24 cents. We plan to do a share consolidation on the back of this transaction. Because there's no shareholder vote or special meeting for Adventus, we couldn't. But our AGM normally is in that Q2 period, and we would look to do that and consider uplisting in the US as well.
Listing on the US, that is relatively expensive G&A wise for Canadian companies. Do you think it still would make sense?
Yeah, I think the share consolidation makes sense. In North America, we're not like Australians where we look fondly on 400 million shares outstanding, although it really doesn't matter in the whole scheme of things. The share consolidation is also a precursor for listing in the United States. All these exchanges have a minimum share price. I think there is a lot of wealth that is available in the US and ETFs for mining companies that Adventus 150 or over 100 million US market cap will have access to, but does not have access to right now. And when the copper trade finally starts moving again, and we're looking at all-time highs, the copper business is too large to be ignored by generalist investors. It is what I think gets us out of the doldrums in the mining space. And I think at that time, a US listing will really be beneficial with the flows of money. That could be next year, but I suspect it's a 2025 story, but it takes time to get.
Okay, let's call it that the bought deal financing is at 6 million Canadian. How much cash will Adventus hold in its treasury once the transaction closes?
There's significant transaction costs, lawyers, investment bankers on both sides, change of control payments on the Luminex side, accounts payable on the Adventus side. So, you'd be looking at 13.5 million US if we're looking at a $17.5 million US final raise. We're hoping that's a little bit more based on where we get to with the closing of the bought deal.
Okay, so in other words, really the financing that you complete will be what's in the treasury post-merger.
Consider closing Adventus and Luminex have no cash. And it's the financing net of the cost of the transaction.
So then, could you walk me through how are you going to finance the Domo project?
Yeah, the majority of that remaining cash, call it 13 million or so, is going towards Domo and preparing for construction in April. So you could apply most of that to the final number. We have the $241 million between Wheaton, Trafigura, and STRACON. We have drawn on about 20 of that, so call it around 220, 222 in that range is still available to us. With equity financing, say at 230 towards the project. We're working on adding an additional non-equity dilutive piece to the equation. We think that can bring in between 25 to 45 million US in addition. So let's say it is 40. So you're taking it to 270. And then I would foresee a final small equity piece, similar size of what we're doing now at some point in the future. The best case scenario would be one strategic investor doing that all themselves at a premium. And I think that is very possible after the permits come in on the project as mentioned. So from a global perspective, 40 plus 20, 60, that seems like a big number. But we've got 241 here in project finance, and we've raised 140 million Canadian in equity to date. The project is very unique, and now with the shareholder base, it's no problem to get that done. The key thing is we're going to do it in the least dilutive way for shareholders, and we're well on our way to getting there.
Okay, so if we start with Wheaton, Trafigura, and the Strathcona, there is some equity there, 10 million from Trafigura and 5 million, I think, from Strathcona. Would that be at market price, or would it be at a premium? Or
yeah, in that 241 number, there is 20 million US of equity that has been dedicated. That money gets issued based on the 10-day VWAP post our environmental approval. So sometime in Q1, I think you'd see a re-rate in the share price, and then after 10 days of trading, whatever that is, that money comes in at that price.
But Wheaton's 5 million, hasn't that been invested?
Well, 10 million is Trafigura, 5 million is STRACON, and 5 million is Wheaton. 5 million of Wheaton is really a discussion at any given time. The money has been invested, but keep in mind, they've been our lead order in every financing since 2019.
Okay, so we got
15 million US to be issued contractually, and there's 5 million that let's just see at the time, what they think.
Increasing the debt, would that be through Trafigura, or?
We have extra debt capacity. We have obviously very good relationships with Wheaton and Trafigura, and they're motivated to see this getting built. So we talk to them. We also talk to third parties, obviously. We not only have interest in additional secured debt, the stream could go larger as well, but we have interest in equipment loans, and we have interest in unsecured convertible debentures. So through combinations of all of that, I think it's fair to say that we'll be able to get about 30 to 45 million additional non-equity dilutive financing.
Sounds good. And by the way, for the viewers' info, it's quite good to know that the interest rate on the credit facility from Trafigura is just 8.1%, which is very beneficial. So in other words, you're not considering, this is something that Wheaton is always open to, increasing the streams, but that is not something that you would like to consider in the first place.
When we announced the feasibility study and our project financing package, the headline at the time was 235.5 million between Wheaton and Trafi, and capital cost of $248 million. And we've been very cute, you could say, or very successful in leveraging this project. There needs to be a balance here, in the capital structure. We have to weigh all of those aspects. Wheaton and Trafigura have to weigh all those aspects. So there's definitely more capacity from a debt perspective, which we will optimize. But I really would like to have, and I'm just throwing out a name. There's nothing to it. Agnico Eagle do a 9.9% equity financing, post their permits at a 40% premium, brings in 20 million US, and we're done. It is equity dilution, but I think that would be like a really elegant way to close it all off.
If we move on to Condor, so Luminex flagship project, there is a PEA out, but since then you have discovered the Cuyes West breccia pipe, which is a much higher grade than the overall sort of open pit. So could you add some color? How large is it? Because you already have 335 million tons of resources if you would go with open.
The district is extremely fertile. There is artisanal, both legal and illegal, gold mining all over the place. And if you go down the river from Condor, you're talking about serious, like you look at the Yukon Gold Rush shows, these artisanal miners down the river they put the Yukon gold miners to shame. That gold is coming out of Condor. So there is a lot more to be discovered. This is prospective for copper gold, porphyry, gold, copper, porphyry, epithermal gold. The systems have not been tested to depth, and yeah, there's a lot more to be done. I think it is a project that could be for mid-tier or large cap gold miner. It's set up so you can have 3, 4, 5, 6 drill rigs turning. We are thinking about it, of course, as what could we do as Adventus today as our secondary project, but we have that optionality for a larger project. If copper's $7 and we're generating $100 million a year of free cash flow, and the gold price is $3,000 an ounce, then we can build a larger project. But right now we're scoping it as what is a similar size project to El Domo, 100,000 ounces of gold equivalent production a year at low cost, maybe $200 to $300 million capital cost, and something we can start construction with our team later this decade. Possible during this decade, we joint venture that project, we sell the project. All those options are on the table, but it's worth a lot of money.
Okay, so if we zoom in, so what's the plan for next year for Condor?
Part of it is determined by what is the final number we raise on this bought deal financing. Is it the 6 where we're at, or is it 10? If we're close to the 10, I think you'll see 1 or 2 kind of surgical drill programs, one at Condor, one at our Agua Santa VMS discovery in Curipamba. If it's in the middle, maybe we just do Condor. We'd like to do, and so with Luminex, 5 to 10,000 meters of drilling, following up on the high-grade structures and that 1 ounce type of stuff. Continuing down the path each year on kind of low-cost exploration programs to get to that 1 to 2 million ounces at the 5 grams. We need to have a presence at the camp and the project anyways, so it's not too much incremental cost, but you have to understand every dollar that's going to Condor is taking away from construction. What is our overall cost of capital and access to capital? That's what it's all going to be about. So I think we'll be evaluating all of that and all options for every project except for Curipamba going forward.
Regarding that, having a surgical drill program, what is the drilling cost per meter in Ecuador?
Yeah, Luminex and ourselves have been able to keep our drilling costs low based on proprietary relationships. In case of Adventus, we drill exclusively with the Salazars, our minority partner, that they own a drilling company, but we're kind of the same. Condor and Curipamba, it's about $200 a meter.
US or Canadian?
US.
Awesome. So then we could move on to Pegasus. VMS skarn system with potential for porphyry. Anglo American owns 25% of it. Could you give us an overview of the project?
Yeah, Anglo American has spent $26 million over the last 5-6 years to earn a 25% interest. There are discussions going on right now with regards to that arrangement. We hope that Anglo American comes back with an updated joint venture, but no guarantees. And it would be great for them to continue on the project on exploration. Very prospective ground for porphyry, skarn, VMS, epithermal gold. So that's one of our partnerships, or that was one of Luminex's partnerships that hopefully we can kind of reset going into 2024.
By the way, what kind of drill results has Anglo American had?
That $26 million was primarily set up to drill. So now the next stages of the project is drilling.
What are they looking for?
Well, what Anglo is looking for is 500 million to 1 billion ton or more copper porphyry projects. That's their target.
We'll now zoom in on the Curipamba project, where we, among others, will discuss the backstory of it, royalty and streams, permitting, construction timeline, expansion opportunities, and much more. Could you give us the backstory of the Curipamba project and how Altius and eventually Adventus got involved with it?
It was discovered by Freddie Salazar, formerly the discoverer of Fruta del Norte, in 2008. It was advanced by Salazar Resources until 2017, primarily through strategic investments from Silvercorp, Lundin Mining, Chinese miner and Trafigura. It is 10 million tons at 5% copper equivalent, approximately. That is what Sandfire Resources built their multi-billion-dollar company on. It is, very similar but different commodity mix to Adriatic Resources, which is a billion-dollar company building a BMS in Bosnia right now. I went down as an investment banker 2010 after the discovery to see what they were drilling, and it's world-class grade. It's a stepwise better grade than any other VMS, copper VMS that I know being drilled. It is absolutely a mine, and in 2017, the Salazars were running a process to try to find a financing solution. So it was easy for us to step in there and be part of that process, and also know what the Salazars were looking for in an ideal transaction. So that's how we got the deal done late 2017, and it's been very good relationship since.
What streams and royalties are there? Could you summarize that are on the Curipamba project?
Yeah, Altius has a 2% royalty that they acquired from resource capital funds that had funded Salazar historically. And there's the stream that Wheaton has, which is on 50% of the gold at El Domo and 75% of the silver at El Domo.
What is the drop-down clause on the gold and silver streams?
The drop-down clause happens after our open pit and underground are mined out, so year 14 currently, and I believe it drops down by a third.
Is it both the underground too? Because that isn't included in the mine plan from the feasibility study. That was just a PEA level.
No, it drops down on both.
Okay, but drops down after the underground has been mined out.
Correct, yeah. It's based on a certain number of ounces delivered on the stream, and that currently works out to be what is currently in the open pit and underground mine plan.
Could you explain where are we or where are you in the permitting process?
The consultation process is a two-stage process, with the first one being the heavy lifting. That's done for us. We have a final meeting with our direct communities of interest over the next few weeks, and then we can get issued the permit. All of this on a non-binding process. We have technical approval prior to all of that having started in June. We have, I think it's 6 secondary permits total to receive to be fully permitted. We've received 1 in October. We expect announcements of the other 5 over the next weeks. Not sure which comes first, but all of them are in the final issuance stage. So we expect by April to have what we need in hand to start construction.
Okay, so in other words, seems like the ancillary permits are coming along well, but so the second, and which is quite short, consultation process to get the final approval for the ESIA permit will happen in a few weeks. But what happens thereafter, and who has to sort of make the final signing of the ESIA permit?
Well, when I say these permits are coming in weeks, these are the final signed permits. It's not like in Canada where you need 200 permits. They're just a handful here, and then we start construction. Then it becomes more importantly, how are we sourcing that last chunk of money that we've talked about, and so that we haven't stopped thinking about that despite this Luminex transaction. We're working through various options, which we hope to have announced Q1, but maybe early Q2.
What is the timeline after the second consultation process has occurred?
Yeah, it's just a few weeks for administrative stamps.
You're relatively certain that will occur in the first quarter of next year?
Yeah, everything is aligning to that. We are 2 years in to the process. There can always be appeals, protection orders, you name it. But based on what we know today and the support of our communities and the government, that is the best information we have. We should receive in the Q1.
Perfect. And thereafter, so when you have received it, could you just briefly, I know it's a presentation, but still walk us through the timeline for early works, construction, commissioning, and ramp up?
It's 22 months of early works in construction. In month 20, you're starting to produce your first concentrate. Probably month 21, you're break even from a cash flow perspective. And we've set aside 3 months for a ramp up to commercial production. So you're looking commercial production Q2 of 2026, but you're cash flow positive a few months before that.
Could you add some color to the underground expansion and when you potentially could pull the trigger on that?
Yeah, we would complete the feasibility study on that likely during construction and look to modify existing permits in year 1 of production and start construction on that through cash flow in year 2. So year 3 in production.
Would you like to give us a ballpark figure of the capex for the underground expansion?
Yeah, you're looking at around $40 million US, and that was outlined in the PEA. As I mentioned in my presentation, it's the same deposit as the open pit. It just happens to have barren andesitic dome that's too expensive to strip off. So it starts 90 meters below surface, and it's going to be mined kind of in a horizontal manner. So not much that goes in there from a development perspective. It will be contract mined. We have sufficient tailings capacity for it, and we've signed an area and a process plan to do the expansion. So it's primarily, I think about the 40 million as probably 25 million as process plant, and the remainder as underground development.
Could you summarize all the early works that you have done which will benefit the construction of Curipamba?
Sure. Main early works program has not yet started. In our feasibility study, we had around $20 million of early works. And as is common on these types of projects and companies like ours, after the feasibility study, we get into detailed design and obviously look to optimize. And so some of the early works, including some road work, especially offsite road work, and some other things we've pushed into sustaining capital. So what we've done on site to date is largely site investigation. So part of our early works program was linked to the site investigation necessary for the development of detailed engineering. All of that work has been complete. So things like geotechnical, hydrogeological work to be able to advance the design is complete. The construction early works, things like camp installation, internal access roads, water management infrastructure, temporary fuel stations, things like that, has not yet started.
Perfect. And how's the infrastructure at Curipamba, such as power, access roads, proximity to port?
Sure. So we are about 2.5 hours northeast of the major port city of Guayaquil. So from Guayaquil all the way to Las Naves are our main highways in Ecuador that are paved and in good condition. We do have to improve access roads, about 17 kilometers of access roads from the town of Las Naves up to the site, which currently are gravel roads. For the power connection, we have to build a 7-kilometer, 69 kV power line to tie into the national grid, so we're fairly close there. So in general, it's not a remote project. It's fairly close to existing national infrastructure.
You're planning on starting the early works in the first half of next year, probably Q2. What early works will you do before making the formal construction decision?
Yeah, so the way our current view on permitting and start of construction is it's likely that we will get full construction or project sanctioning, full construction permission before starting early works. The early works program, as I was saying, we've with the optimization, we pushed some of what was early works in the feasibility study into sustaining capital. So the early works, or what we call early works program, is about $10 million, which is camp installation, internal access roads, water management infrastructure. And the way the timeline is, we've had some delays here, but the way the timing is working out, likely we get our environmental license, we get full project sanctions, and we start construction. And then the first activities would be those that are slated, that we've called early works.
How many workers do you have currently?
Currently, we have 141 workers here in Ecuador at Curry Mining. About 30 of those are in the corporate office here in Quito, and the rest of them are field workers, or we're working in Las Naves, let's say.
When will you start mobilizing the contractors?
Yeah, that's right. So as soon as we get our environmental license, we will activate our mining contractor. We've signed a contract with a consortium of STRACON, so they're in charge of all the mine development and the construction of the tailings facility. So once we get the environmental license in hand, we will activate their mobilization. It'll take about 2 months for them to be on the ground and actually starting construction. So we're expecting that to happen in Q2 of next year. And the construction schedule, the critical path runs through the mine pre-strip and the starter dam construction. It's about 22 months. And the plant construction slots in there and is currently on the schedule, finishes about 4 months before the completion of the mine development.
Could you walk us through the timeline of the construction? Name the most important milestones and what the order they come.
Sure, absolutely. So we will, once we get our environmental license, as I said, we'll start mobilization of our contractor. They will start working on internal access roads. In parallel, we'll be doing camp installation. We'll be doing all of the temporary infrastructure for water management, which is a big deal for us. We're in a high rainfall area. And so it's important for us to have channels and ponds and silt fences and all of those things necessary to control sedimentation during the construction. So that takes us through about the first 3 months of construction. And then in month 3, we start the excavation on the foundation of the starter dam, and then run in parallel with the mine pre-strip. Obviously, all of the material for the dam construction comes out of the mine. So that's been detailed sequence has been put together with STRACON on board. We've gone through a lot of the constructability and optimizing the sequence of that, especially the earthworks, the pre-strip and the starter dam construction, to make sure that we have the material that we need, the andesite that's going to come out of the mine for the dam destruction, that we have the quantities that we need at the time we have to be able to advance that. So then we're about 96% complete on the engineering for all of the earthworks. So the everything involved with the mine development and the dam. The plant, we're at about 36% advanced on the plant. So as soon as we get that environmental license, we'll also reactivate the detailed design for the plant. And then we'll start about 9 months after construction. We'll start the construction for the plant, and then that'll run through to about 4 months before we finish the critical path, which is all the earthworks. So we're expecting at 22 months, mine development will be complete, starter dam's complete, and we'll go into startup and commissioning of the plant.
Could you add some color to the regional exploration potential of Curipamba?
Sure. So the Curry Mining holds 7 mining concessions that total about 23,000 hectares. They're all contiguous concessions that are in the Bolivar province and Los Rios. The Curipamba Domo project is all in Bolivar. And so there's a number of interesting targets that are on the list that are prioritized for further exploration. When the Salazar started exploration, I'm sure that you know that Salazar Resources started back in 2006 with the exploration of this project or of those concessions, and then Adventus got involved in 2017. So fairly quickly after they started exploration, say 6 months, they encountered the Curipamba El Domo deposit, and obviously all of the effort and investment went into developing that asset to get us to where we are today. But there are a number of additional interesting targets with preliminary information that are on the list be investigated once we're up and running with El Domo.
Could you explain how you would do the underground expansion and when you would do it?
Sure. So in our PEA that was published with our feasibility study, the concept there was that the underground mine would be a continuation of the open pit mining. So in year 9, there would be additional investment to develop the underground mine, about $42 million of investment to be able to develop that. And that it would, the plant would continue to operate at its design capacity of 1,850 tons per day. And the duration of that would be 5 years. So it would be 10 years open pit plus 5 years underground. That's what's in the PEA. Since then, we have been looking at some other concepts, looking to improve the NPV of the project. So the leading concept that we've been looking at now is to bring forward the underground expansion to year 3. And the idea would be that during construction, we would proceed with the necessary studies, a feasibility study, and obviously after that, detailed design and everything necessary to develop that concept, where the underground mine would come into production, or the underground piece would come into production in year 3 and run for 7 years, so that it would end in year 10 at the same time as the open pit mine. Under that scenario, the throughput or the additional throughput for the underground piece would be around 1,000 tons per day. Conceptually, it would be a separate circuit for crushing and grinding, and we would increase the capacity on the flotation circuits. On the current terrace that we have, there's space for the expansion of the flotation circuit, and we probably would have to increase the terrace size a little bit for the additional crushing and grinding. So that's obviously, it's in conceptual phase at this time. There's still a lot of work to be done.
So in other words, so if I got it right, you would increase the throughput from 1,850 tons per day to sort of 2,600, 2,700 tons per day?
That's right. So to be, our current plant has 1,850 tons per day. And so we would add an additional 1,000 tons capacity, so to be 2,800.
And say that you would find something significant on your property through your regional exploration program. How easy would it be to further increase the processing capacity at El Domo?
Yeah, so there is some additional space, let's say, for processing plant. I think the other challenge that we'd have to tackle, obviously, is for tailings. So that's something that's just in very high level conceptual form at this point. But as we move through, further investigation after El Domo is in production, then we'll look to solve for those issues as well.
Since Adventus has all of its projects located in Ecuador, we'll zoom in on the mining jurisdiction Ecuador and discuss the pros and cons of operating there, including permitting timelines and tax regime. We'll also touch on the political situation in Ecuador. With that, I would like to move away from the Curipamba project and move into Ecuador. So, I mean, all of your projects, including Luminex projects, are in Ecuador. So, how is Ecuador as a mining jurisdiction?
Ecuador has been consistent since 2017 for us in Luminex as being extremely supportive from a national level, from a national government perspective, to advance mining. Mining is now the 3rd largest contributor to the economy, and there's only 2 major mines in production. So they're motivated. Their oil industry is waning. A few years they'll be half the production that they were at their peak. The biggest growth potential in the country is copper. And I think the government understands their contribution to climate change is the development of their copper business. They're still, I would say, in the teething pains when it comes to regulation and the law on being able to permit mining projects and advance them, as well as the people of Ecuador understanding what modern responsible mining is. They understand it in Zamora province. They might not understand it in the northwestern part of the country. So they're still playing catch up to, say, Peru and Chile. The best thing for the country, though, is to continue to show new, modern, responsible mines, and show the people that this can be done in a way where everyone wins. And I think that the business can really take off as this decade continues.
So in Ecuador, how difficult is permitting, both in regards to exploration and obtaining exploitation permits?
In Ecuador, there's a defined process, but there are a lot of concessions and a lot of companies operating with limited resources from a governmental perspective, let alone qualified technicians to go through the process. So it's important to be top of mind with the ministries and be well connected to advance your projects. The government closed the cadastre in 2017, I believe. That's the online staking process, or the staking process, call it, because things got overheated. So a lot of the majors have been waiting patiently for the cadastre to reopen, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. We're fine with that, though, because it makes the concessions that we hold today more valuable. When it comes to permitting for exploitation, hasn't been done many times. And so it is still a fairly novel process. It hasn't been done for a while, on a size of project like ours. But as I mentioned, we're near the end, and we're currently 2 years into it. But about a year of it was delays through politics.
Thank you for adding that color. But I mean, if you would compare it to sort of Canadian permitting timelines, of course, it differs between province, but general, compared to BC, what would you say?
Yeah, there was a Twitter poll the other day on what is your favorite project that is in permitting hell, I think they used the word. So I was flattered because these are good quality projects, and the author made it clear. But some of my peers are literally in permitting hell, like 10 years with another 10 years counting. And I was going to write this, but I didn't. At the time, we were like 19 months in. That's pretty good with 19 months in with line of sight in the next few months. In the United States, most places you need to exhaust all of the appeals processes. You're talking about 10 to 15 years. In Canada, depending on where you are and how your First Nations relationship is, and it really depends on that, it can be as quick as 6 to 12 months. Or in British Columbia, think about historically greenfields projects took 10 years. So if we can get this done in 24 to 28 months from start to finish, it is quick. Where it gets a little frustrating is that 24 to 28 months is not a straight line. It wasn't understood to be, that route. It meandered many different ways and had lots of starts and stops, which in return makes my hair gray. But it is what it is.
There has been some political turbulence in Ecuador this year. Could you give us a quick recap on this, and also what is the current political situation?
Turbulence is the right word to use. Entering this year, things were calm, and then there was another push for impeachment of President Lasso between March and May. It could have gone any way. We're pretty close to the politics, and every week it was he's going to get impeached. No, he doesn't have enough votes to get impeached. He's announcing the cross death, which no one expected. And then what is the impact of a cross death? I was in Ecuador at the time. In Peru, when it was enacted, it was chaos. But in Ecuador, it was orderly. President Lasso was a good person. And I don't think anybody was calling him really on corruption. It was just the government that didn't function very well. And Lasso understood that and declared the cross death, which disbanded the assembly, and then he called elections, and now he's out of his position. But over the period of end of May to last week, when Lasso ran his course, things got done in Ecuador. The elections in August ended up being quite the surprise. Not so much in the candidate from Correa's party, but more so in the second candidate that ran in the the subsequent second round in October. Daniel Noboa, he came from nowhere in the polls. So it was a big surprise. He did very well in the presidential election, not election, the debate in August. And he's a dynamic guy that understands politics and had a believable platform or policy when it came to security. And security is a big issue in Ecuador these days. So in the runoff, he ended up winning. The assembly is one we believe can get things done under Daniel. And he's a young guy with a young cabinet, but he has ambitions to have a second term after this. So we're encouraged and look forward to working with him and his cabinet, who are pro-industry and pro-mining.
You received an investment contract or an investment protection agreement with the Ecuadorian government. How does that affect Curipamba?
Yeah, some countries' investment protection agreement isn't worth the paper it's written on. In Ecuador, it is quite powerful. It has the concept has been around for decades. There have been instances where the government reneged on their contract, but in every case, the government has paid. I don't want to use that as a opening point, but I think it's important to say that because in Panama, with First Quantum, there's more noise around the investment protection agreement. We have a very similar agreement to Mirador and Frutal Norte. The law that it's governed under is New York law, English language. Ecuador signed up to the COFIDE principles, the conflict resolution principles globally. It is a strong agreement, and it is meant to protect our investment that we made to date on the project, which is 85 million US approximately, and then also be a path to recoup lost NPV in the courts. But it definitely should give the comfort to investors in a worst case scenario, and I think it did that in particular with Frutal Norte and Lundin Gold, where they had to raise $1 billion, and most of that came through big sophisticated groups out of the EU and Orion.
Could you give us an explanation of the tax burden on mining in Ecuador? Royalties, special taxes, corporate tax rate?
Yeah, with the investment protection agreement, our corporate tax rate is 20%, so pretty decent. We pay a 15% tax on EBIT, and that goes to the province and the workers. And there is in our case, we're a medium scale project so a 4% net smelter royalty to the government. The total burdens on an effective percentage would be the high 30s, which is comparable to other countries in the Americas.
With this merger, Adventus will have a great deal of projects in Ecuador, which is why we will discuss how the management is thinking in terms of portfolio management and leveraging partnerships to advance the exploration projects. We'll discuss if it would make sense to acquire Salazar, which owns 25% of Curipamba, and finally we'll ask Christian about his vision for Adventus. With this merger, you will have a great deal of projects, all in Ecuador, and Curipamba will be burning cash as it goes into construction. So how are you going to manage your portfolio, finding new, making earning agreements, finding partners, or monetizing assets? Could you add some color to that?
Well, Adventus has done a very good job from the beginning of being able to monetize assets. We started with a large land package in Newfoundland that was early stage, and we ended up spending about $1 million and exiting for $6.5 million in cash. In Ireland, we had the largest land package in Ireland there for a while. We vended out our Southern Irish properties to a Australian project generator, and we're in the process of monetizing that position for a 3 to 4x return. And we have a joint venture with South 32 still in Ireland. So, those were very early stage projects, and in the end, we'll probably have realized over 10 million US in cash on an expenditure of, call it 2.5, and just over the last few years. Luminex has done a great job of finding partners for its projects. I suspect we bring some unique relationships to the table. And with that and their relationships, we can find more partnerships on projects. But outside of Condor, I see the project package as self-fulfilling, both in terms of exploration expenditures and cash burn. And Condor, we will just have to see. The focus, though, is putting Curipamba or El Domo to production as quickly as possible, and we will evaluate our access to capital, our cost of capital, and what our shareholders want, and make the appropriate capital allocation decisions. But the majority, the super majority, is going towards Curipamba.
What companies could be interested in earning into your projects?
Yeah, the Japanese government currently has one JV in place. So in governmental organizations are looking to dip their toe in Ecuador. A lot of countries know nothing about Ecuador. It's a easy way to start, I guess. The districts that we have, or the concessions that we have, all have good geological theses around them. They all have the right rocks to be the next Mirador type discovery, or a significant gold discovery. So any company, I would say mid-tier or larger, that is looking for copper gold porphyries should be in the mix. Some of these projects may be a good starter kit to start a new company with an entrepreneurial organization. In the case of Condor, if we decided to do something there, I think that is open to the mid-tier to large cap companies, as there is the potential to find multi-million ounces more and create a project that is 250 to 300,000 ounce per annum producer.
How are you going to advance Condor without sort of allocating too much money towards it?
Well, this is something we haven't finalized yet. We have different budget situations. Extreme care maintenance, call it, on hold or actively drilling. And in either case, there's not too much of a divergence between the scenario. As I mentioned, $1 million goes fair ways. So part of the decision is going to be based on how much money we end up bringing in on this spot deal finance.
You own 75% of the Curipamba deposit. Salazar owns the rest. Could you explain the agreement that you have with Salazar and how the free cash flows are distributed?
Yeah, we're responsible to fund 100% of the capital costs to commercial production. We have the rights to stream and do debt financing on behalf of both parties, and we've done the transactions we've outlined today. Once in production, or let's say commercial production, they are on the hook for contributing their portion of the capex in case we do expansions, etc. We have preferential payback. The first $30 million US goes 100% to us, and then 95% of the dividends go to us until all of our equity contributions have been repaid, and then it becomes 75-25. If, for example, we agree to increase capacity by 50%, then that will delay additional dividends to our partners.
It's just your equity portion, and how much equity have you raised and funded? How much is eligible?
I believe it is 65 million of equity spent. I'm not including the initial deposit from Wheaton and Trafigura because that's not equity, but that's in addition another about 18. And of that 65, just under 20 was done by the Salazars. So in terms of our equity contribution from the beginning, I think I'm probably a quarter behind here. You're looking at just under 50 million US.
In other words, until you have paid 50 million in dividends, they will start to receive their 25%.
Yeah, but of course it's going to be more because there's an equity contribution to construct the mine.
So the debt is incurred in the joint venture, not on Adventus Mining.
Correct. The debt and the streaming is an obligation of Curry Mining, which is the company, the Ecuadorian company that owns Curipamba, and we jointly own Cuyes Mining. So it's not just on Adventus; it's on both parties.
Would it make sense to acquire or merge with Salazar then?
At some point, yes.
That was a quick answer, but do you foresee that to be before commercial production or after?
My feeling is it would be likely after we start construction, because then it's clear what Adventus's ultimate capital structure looks like.
Where do you envision Adventus Mining in 5 years?
Well, if my thesis of copper being $7 or $8 a pound, if not more, is true in 26 and 27, then this asset in its own right could support a $500 million to $1 billion US market cap, with very strong free cash flows, and a team that just built a open pit mine in South America. There's always a price, I believe, in M&A, but this is the type of asset that builds companies. So in 5 years, when we're generating all that free cash flow, the question is going to be, do we continue to build in Ecuador, the next asset? And few have done it, so we definitely have an advantage. Or do we look elsewhere for opportunities? Naturally, it would be Condor as the next project. So I think that's a reasonable assumption at this time. But we're pretty up to speed on what's going on globally, and our team has worked around the world. So I think we'll be open-minded. So long story short is probably constructing second mine, wherever that is, and on to building something more significant.